if you go to our Bridge Church NYC page, why don't you go to the live and share it on your personal page, and that way people can see your live now. So go to Bridge Church NYC while people are coming on.
Okay.
I will do the same thing. Let's see. I'm going to share it. While everybody's coming on, I'm really excited today because the Lord has given us a great opportunity to hear from a great woman of God, Lashay Crayton. And so we'll let people slowly come on and get started here. So we'll give a few minutes for people to get on.
Okay.
All right. There we go. Talking with a clinical therapist. Lashay. All right. All right. Were you able to share it, Lashay?
I'm sharing now, yeah.
Okay, great. Great. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Everybody checking in. Good to see everybody checking in. My family is checking in, and all the good people at Bridge Church are checking in. Okay, so it's 12:11. Lashay, we'll get started here if you're good to go.
Okay. Yes.
And so it's exciting to have Lashay Crayton on here. Before I get started, let me just give you a little bit of background about what we're doing here. So every day at 12:10, we try to do, on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 12:10, we do a devotional to encourage people and to equip people, because Romans 12:10 says, be devoted to one another in love and honor one another. And during the COVID-19 crisis, we really feel like we cannot get so isolated that we're only thinking about ourselves. We want to be externally facing as we look to God and love our neighbor. And so what we want to do is every day at 12:10, we want to reach out to somebody. And so the phrase that we've said is every hand we can't shake needs to become a phone call or a text message that we make. And so with that in mind, we know that as we're calling people and contacting people, we need to be encouraged and filled up ourselves. So that's why we do this devotional. I also want to just encourage people that if you are not connected to any community, we'd love to connect with you. We have some online groups that meet on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. If you do want to get connected to one of our online groups, you will text to the number 484848, and you'll text the phrase online 20. Again, that's 484848. And that's online 20. And the last thing I want to just make clear for people is that if you know anybody who is struggling financially right now, or if you are struggling financially right now, we do have a financial assistance program at our church. You would go to our website, bridgechurchnyc.com, and you will do /BeTheBridge. That's bridgechurchnyc.com/BeTheBridge. Well, I'm honored today to have Lashay Crayton, and that's Crayton. That's right?
That's correct.
And is there an apostrophe? Is it Lashay? Is there an apostrophe there?
There is an apostrophe. My mother was fancy.
Yes, yes.
Apostrophe there.
Lashay Crayton. Lashay, give us a little bit of your. Well, Lashay is a therapist, but Lashay also has a theological background. Lashay, give us a little bit about your clinical history, your church history. Tell us how you got to be who you are today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I started in this work kind of in the field of mental health after my brother was diagnosed with the vulnerability of schizophrenia and bipolar and all the things that kind of go comorbid with that. And so I've been interested in mental health for many years. Mm-hmm. I started actually as an epidemiologist. So my background looks at major mood and depressive disorders among African Americans, and my current work looks at major mood and depressive disorders with Black folks, just in Harlem primarily, but really throughout the diaspora.
Wow.
And my interest is primarily with people of faith. I have a background in pastoral counseling, as well as what we call spiritual formation, which looks at basically kind of the psychology of spirituality. How do we come into spirituality? What does it look like for each? What does it look like for each person? And what do we call spirituality? How does it come through in our lives to actually make a difference? And for me, I'm interested in how it makes a difference in our lives of mental health.
Wow.
And so now I run and operate a private practice. And so I work with people of all different backgrounds, all different faith beliefs. So our practice is not limited to people of faith or to people who are Black at all. We work with everyone and have enjoyed that process. And so I am primarily interested in working with people who just want to achieve better health and wellness outcomes as it pertains to their mental wellness.
Now, your current situation, you help people. You're also married. How long you been married now?
It's almost 4 years.
Wow.
We've been married almost 4 years.
That's awesome. And you are now in the process of bringing a life into this world.
Yes, I am. I am a mama, and I will further that process with bringing a life into the world. Absolutely.
When do you do?
I have about 2 to 3 weeks to go if we're following that kind of train of thought.
Okay.
If he comes when he comes, but yeah, on about 3 weeks.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Lashay, before we get started, I do want to know if any of you have any questions. What we'll do is you can throw a question, put it in the chat, and then our admin will pin it to the top and we'll be able to see it. But please ask questions. That will be helpful to us. And then Lashay, if they want to follow up with you, we'll make sure to drop some information in there.
Absolutely.
For them to be able to follow up with you. So let's just start this off with talking a little bit about COVID-19 and the anxiety that comes about from it. Like, as we think about anxiety, how do you understand that word anxiety and then its effects on the mind, the body, the soul? Tell me about anxiety and just its effects.
Sure. So when we're talking about anxiety, there's always this aspect of some degree of stressor existing, right? The fact that this morning, maybe I didn't want to get out of bed this morning as early as I did, but the reality is that I have to get up, right, and do all the things that I need to do. So there's always some degree of a stressor that we exhibit in life in itself, right? Whether you have to take a test, whether you have to go to work on a busy train, those things kind of always exist. But when we take that a few steps further and we look at our operating system, both mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, being drained or being taken to a very heightened place on a regular basis, or even if it's something that happens not very often, but when it happens kind of strong, where we feel that we're not in as much control as we perceive we would be or we have been. That's a very layman's term of describing anxiety. So the things that can ensue after that are things that we might somaticize in our body, such as sweaty palms. Maybe our heart rate is increased drastically. Maybe our ability to process things look very different. Maybe we're anxious in the sense that we holler, scream, yell, use words that probably aren't our normal way of operating with people that we care about or people in our immediate sphere. Or for some people, they may internalize when they're feeling anxious and they may go inside. And so my grandmother used to say, still water runs deep. And so sometimes we think when we think of anxiety, we think it's always going to be something that externalizes or somaticizes, very loud or obnoxious or fastly pacing on the outside. Now that could be happening very well on the inside, but that's not the way it always looks for everyone.
Yeah.
And we have to kind of tune into people. And so as you all are doing these short kind of episodes daily, right? You might not can hold someone's hand or see someone physically, but these little check-ins make so much difference for a person because you really don't know how people are suffering, right? We don't know unless people let us in. And even then, sometimes we have unprocessed or subconscious emotions that we don't know about. And so anxiety is a few steps or maybe a lot of steps past the kind of normal stressors of life of maybe having a child or a dependent or things like that. it then inhibits our ability to be well. We're somewhat consumed, right? And then we can think about an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And those are things that really feel out of our control.
So, Lashay, just a bit of a thought here and question. Anxiety is one of the things that people might be facing from the health crisis we're in, the financial crisis that we're in. But the other aspect that people are dealing with is isolation. What are some of the effects of just being isolated every day, and just things to manage that?
Absolutely. We were not created to be alone, right? That's for male and female, anyone. We're just, even we know from the research and from science that babies have to be touched, right? When they come out the womb, that people have to look at them. You have to tell them 35,000 words a day for them to operate on a level that's functioning for their age group, right? Wow. It is not normal. It is not natural. And normal just means within a distribution, but it's not normal. It's not natural. It's not healthy for anyone. So this effect of isolation is, now we don't have all the data now, obviously, because that's going to take time and we're going to need to see it afterwards. But I'm hearing from a lot of my colleagues and from our own anecdotal research is that this has taken a huge effect on people. Wow. And so this idea that we can just operate as normal is not true. You cannot operate as normal when you can't go outside, or especially if you're a vulnerable population and you can't do all the things that you used to do, right? It's a disenfranchisement and a breakdown of communities, right? And so even more so, we're always going to see that heavier hit for our more vulnerable populations, which are people who may be low income, are people who don't have as many access to resources. So this take on isolation, you could be operating perfectly fine, well adjusted, having a wonderful, great, quote unquote, life, whatever that looks like for each person. And the toll of this thus far, about 6 weeks, right, could take a huge effect on you. And you could be totally well adjusted, operating right, and have great tools, totally know what to do and how to survive and doing well. And now something like this takes a toll. And so we are conditioned to think that, well, if you functioned before, if things were well before, but that's very robotic, right? We're human beings. And if you take us out of a certain environment that's not conducive to our well-being, well, we might not be well. And so the isolation could take a huge toll on people. And what I'm hoping, that's why things like this is great. But what I'm also hoping is that we will, as a people globally, think of ways to be creative that will allow for people to feel heard, seen, loved upon, and things like that. Even, I tell some of the clients that I work with, even if you have to set your dinner up and have dinner by your window, so you look outside and you see birds, you see the functioning of the trees, right? Flowers doing what they're supposed to do, showing up. That's all they do, right? My morning devotional was in Matthew, talking about the flowers of the field, right? That's all they do is show up, and they're glorious. And so take time to do things like that. They're very little. And if you're not coming from a mindset where you're used to doing those things, it could seem like, what's the point, right? I'm not with people. Maybe that might not be the case, but this is a great time to take a deep breath, not put pressure on yourself to have to show up in any particular way, and refocus in on those little skills, right? And kind of think about when you were a child, the things that brought you joy. Because we do know for children, it tends to be simple little things. So think about those things and what you do have control over. And certainly do not put a lot of pressure on yourself to have, all these things of gaining all these. I see all these memes of, I should have gained 50 skills by the time I'm, you can, but maybe the skill you gain is rest. Maybe it's a Sabbath rest where you take a full day, right? Whatever day that's of your choosing or what that looks like. Maybe you take a full day of rest. Maybe it means that you organize your bed in such a way that it's conducive to your well-being, whatever, right? Whatever. It's going to look different for everyone.
I think some of my takeaways was remembering to connect to creation and also recreation, like doing small things like you mentioned to be able to motivate yourself. But one of the key things you said too was pressure. I think that the nature of New York, as well as for a lot of millennials, this hustle mentality when we're being isolated, like you said, you should have skills. And I love that you use the phrase, the skill of rest, because it's true that many of us look at rest as just a byproduct of being tired, when it's really something that we've got to grow and continually work at especially with phones and things of that nature. So I think that is
Absolutely.
really good. So tell me, in terms of this constant news cycle that we're in, and we're constantly being bombarded and wondering, like, when are we going to get out of this? How do you manage the constant news cycle, even social media and Zoom calls? How do you manage all that and not get too stressed out, or managing those stressors?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know, technology and being able to have access to resources and things like that are certainly a blessing, because there are many parts of the world, or even in New York, where people don't use internet the same way, right? Or don't have access to good things like our good internet. I mean, those are simple things that we find to be a blessing, and have greatly helped our mental wellness and health, right? There's all kind of amazing apps where you can meditate, do all these things, right? But the reality is that learning to be still, and I don't mean this and I want to watch my words, right? I don't mean this in this very like, even though that Eastern is not bad, right? But this is a time where learning to regulate yourself is such a beautiful blessing, because you're kind of forced to do that in many ways. And so now you're learning to teach that amygdala, right? Everything that's happening in the frontal cortex of your brain to not take flight, but to sit down, literally. And so there's information out there, but just like you managed information before, you don't buy every book that's on the shelf. You decide what book is of interest to you based on what your needs are at the time, right? Just like someone can show up at your door and want to sell you a magazine subscription. You have the right to say, hey, you know, I can access that information easily on Google when I want that information. So access information when you want to access the information, right? Sitting still and being reminded of the things that you can't control, or the things that feel like will feed your soul. It's nothing wrong with that. There's no reason why you have to look at every Como update. And you know, and I'm grateful for the work that he's doing and everyone is doing. But there's no reason I have to look at every single update. Why? I think I would start there. Why do you need to see every single update? Right? Maybe that's a great time to, like we talked about, reach out to someone, send a text, right? Some people are introverts. They don't want to get on the phone. That's fine. Send a text, right? Go on a Facebook wall, whatever that needs to look like. I love mailing cards and letters, and I just have a card box. I just have a card box, and I send it out as need be. And it's such a blessing and such a sweet treat for people to receive those things. So think about ways that you can limit the information to what you need, right? It's the same thing as food. We have a lot of these skills already by nature of evolution, right? You don't just eat because the food is there. You decide what substance for your body. And so you have to do the same thing for your mental body, or the mental aspect of your body.
That's so good. Like what I hear you saying is we have to take a diet of the mind, you know, just being very careful of what we bring in. And I think another thing you said, which I think is so good, is that there's things happening in the world, and then there's things happening in my world. And I think Cuomo updates, praise God for him, but they get you so inundated with the world that you almost forget about your world that you're operating in. I think that's so good. So in terms of feeling out of control, so many things for some people, even before the COVID-19, many people had a hard time controlling their thought life, like feeling like they're in control. With so many things out of control in our world, how do you feel like you can gain control again, even of your thoughts, but just your world? How do you get control back?
I love that, and I do this too, right? We cling to that word control. We think somehow it gives us this level of power, our identity, right? And I have to watch myself on one of them too, right? It's this aspect of like, I have control. I'm the captain of my sea, right? But really, how true is that, right? There could be a hurricane right now, and we all would have to submit to the hurricane, right? We know what to do in states like, I'm originally from California. I mean, every week we had an earthquake drill, right?
Right.
If there's an earthquake, I know what to do. I can go straight into motion, find my doorpost, because I'm so trained in that somehow there's a level of control to that. But at the end of the day, that earthquake is probably going to be more than likely more powerful than me. I have to submit to the order of that earthquake in so many ways. And so we're in a very similar time right now, right? Is that there should always be some degree of autonomy, of self-determination. I believe that people have the right to self-determination. I believe that people have the right to autonomy. But it's also the case that we really have to control everything? If we are in a situation that we're in, and right now we're in quarantine, right? And I won't go into personal preferences or opinions on that or whatever the case, but the reality is that if we're deciding that we want to be well, some things we have to let go control over, right? That made me, I play tennis. I love to take walks. I mean, I would love to get out and see I love to bake. I love to cook. I would love to get out and see my neighbors, go sit, have coffee, have tea, but I really can't control that. I can't, right? I have to submit to this aspect that their well-being, my well-being is dependent on their well-being, and their well-being is dependent on mine. And so I submit to that. And so I release and relinquish control over that. And instead, I harness what can still be well, that I still have some degree of autonomy over, which is sitting by my window, which is reading a great book, which is waving to friends out the window, right? Or little things like that, calling people, watching a movie together. There's so many apps where you can do all these things. So instead, I submit to what I don't have to have control over, and I release that. And here's just an example that exists outside of COVID. My husband, we have, varying roles in the household. I want nothing to do with the car. Don't ask me anything about the car. I don't care about the car. I get in the car. I ride where we go. I show up. I get out the car. And that's really all I care about the car. I don't care nothing about the car.
Yes.
He cares about the car. He gets the car done. He does all this. He'll say, babe, should we do? I don't care. You decide. I feel so much freedom. Now, there are things that I care about that I'm like, hon, just let me have this one, right? So sure. But I don't take on anything extra to manage that because I don't need to. I don't need to. And that's something that not only do I not need to, I can actually release. I don't have to have anything in that. And that's one more thing that I don't need to add to my life, that I've freed up to do all the things that are wonderful for me, all the things that feel good for my well-being and for my health. And so a lot of us are taking on, right, as we talk about the diet of the mind, a lot of us are putting a lot of food on our plate because it's there. Right? Because it's Thanksgiving, whatever, all the food is there. And so we're deciding that we have to maintain a regular schedule. How can you maintain a regular schedule in the middle of a worldwide pandemic? Like, that's not regular, right? So having grace for ourselves and having grace for others.
And you would say the same with social media, our intake of social media? Yeah.
Absolutely. Use it as need be and as feels good, right? But only right, what triggers you.
Right.
If we
that's a great statement.
Where I don't know, what triggers you.
Right.
I heard an old school saying that used to say, if you throw a rock in a pack of dogs, right, the first one that hollers ouch is the first one to hit, which means that triggered you, that hit you. So so people have to be comfortable sitting with themselves and really ask questions of who am I in times like this. And that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people.
That is so good. What triggers you. And so in a lot of ways, Lashay, what you're saying is you can't focus on, some people can do things you just can't do, and that phrase being triggered, you need to know what's happening inside of you. One last thing I think it will be helpful for us, Lashay. One of the things that's happening right now is the nature of grief. And, you and I talked about this quickly, that I think some poor theology wants to move, has this kind of like Martha mentality of just moving, going, and not really processing. What's a healthy thought process for the fact that, man, right now there's an ambulance going by and I'm reminded of death. And if I've not been grieving, I know someone that's grieving. What's a healthy way to get people to think about grief during this time?
And grief is a bit of a loaded word, because really when we think about grief, Grief and loss kind of go together. I've studied what's called complicated grief by Catherine Shear, who does a lot of work at Columbia as well. And so grief and loss really go together. You can be very well adjusted, doing fine in life, happy, healthy on multiple levels, and have a passing and exhibit the signs immediately of depression. Not just mild or moderate, but severe depression. So we're trained as clinicians that you would never diagnose someone as depressed, even if they meet all the qualifiers or specifiers, right, in your own clinical judgment and opinion, if they've experienced grief. Because a huge shift like that, something that is so cannot be taken away, is not a time to where, even if the signs are the same as depression, you would not diagnose. That's how strong grief is that it can exhibit something that quick. And loss goes with grief. You can be fine and have a fire and lose everything and exhibit the exact same signs of grief. Denial, acceptance, right? The same kind of model as grief. So I'm going to put those two together, grief and loss, because it's grieving the passing of what the world used to be. Grieving the passing of being able to be social. This aspect of social for so many people. I mean, this is why a lot of people stay in New York City for many reasons, because you can constantly be social, right? We don't have the same outcomes if you're living in the middle of Iowa, right? Your world looks different, and people are yearning for that. And so it's very serious when we think about grief and loss, and take it even in the sense of the loss of lives, right? And so as we think about what it looks like and how to cope at times like this, is I always say, go back to what felt good in a way that was edifying. Because we're also in a culture where it's this whole self-care thing and what feels good, but we have to be very careful, because a lot of times what may have felt good may not have been edifying. And so really go back to what feeds your soul, right? How do I cope with something that may never exist again, whether it's a person or it's my employment. We haven't even touched on that on a more macro level, right? So much to touch on, but those are very real things. The world will not look the same, quite frankly, because it can't. And so when we think about grief and loss, allow yourself to feel the feelings of grief and loss. There's a lot of amazing science behind crying. Actually, it's actually good for your immune system. It helps you. What in itself is crying? Crying is not I like to tell clients that these things are not roadmaps in and of themselves, but they're signals on the map, right? They tell us whether we should go left or we should go right, or if we should stay on the highway, right? Depending on the type of crying that we're doing. And so it's okay that this won't be a linear model, and that it won't be a linear feeling, that you might have moments of like, it's so nice and I have to go to work and stay home. And then on the other side, feel deeply grieved for people who would want to go to work so they can bring in income, right? Those things are not mutually exclusive. You're allowed to have all those feelings come. Feelings are visitors. They're not the roadmap, because we don't have to be led by them, but they are signals. They tell us whether to slow down, go, or stop. And so if we're not used to if we don't listen to the feelings of grief or loss or anything else we're feeling, we don't know which way to go. And so we have to learn how to use the roadmap, whatever that looks like for each person. I don't assume that everybody is Christian, everybody has their own practices.
But I love one of the things you said, a couple things you said, when you said that feelings are signals, right? They're giving us insight on the roadmap. And the other thing you said is feelings are visitors. And, some things you welcome, and some things, like you said, you don't have to welcome as long. And so, and the last thing I thought was amazing there is there are people who are, maybe their friendships are also being lost along with jobs. And so using loss, not just death, but there's just a loss of something, I think is really powerful. There's a couple of questions I'd love to throw out there to you. One is a little longer, but I'm going to read it. In recent weeks, there's one young lady, Anna had a job loss, is included responding. Her job is included responding to an increased demand for information, all labeled as high priority. She's working overtime, but it's not quick enough for her managers. She's considering they're considering questioning of her work ethic. She considers the questioning of her work ethic to be an insult. specifically when her boss says he can't see what she's doing at home. How does she handle this? Also, since her living room is now her new office, how does she create a relaxing space when she logs off? Great question.
Great question, Anna. Thank you so much. And first, let me express to you how challenging that must be, right? I could only imagine what that must feel like for you. And so thank you for being vulnerable and transparent and wanting to be on here, because other people could be blessed by that question as well. Well, it's a few things, right? And I want to always state this as I'm answering questions. I think it's a difference from me talking with Pastor Robeson and answering some questions to you all. I am an advocate for therapy. So I don't pretend to be here and have all these solutions and all the things. There's so many nuances, even in questions, right? And there's nuances in even what I say. You should go and read more and see the context of everything that I've said here. And so that's the first thing that I always tell people. Now, I know that there are further nuances of what we can afford and things like that. So you have to look into that. Right. But I will say, to just kind of give a general picture of that for you, Anna, is that, you know, this might be a situation again where how you set it up and how you prepare little things such as greenery. It's called the 72-hour effect. Having more greenery in your life makes a lot of difference. And here's what's fabulous about that is women actually do better with greenery and outdoor spaces and things like that. So we can't always get out there, but bringing those things in, even if it's faux greenery. So setting up your space in such a way that it feels refreshing to you, right? Fake flowers make the difference. Little things like that that you can control, and that would be an area you would want to control, could help in the sense of how to set that space up, right? Being very diligent so that when you do take your breaks, you can actually take a break. And maybe, connecting with your supervisor in a way that, not that you try to understand or pathologize him or try to, say, is he projecting or something like this, but being honest in a way that feels safe and saying, I really value this aspect where I can do what I need to do and be trusted to do what I need to do, right? How we set some of those things up could help greatly. Of course, I would not just tell you to do that. I think you have to explore that. And maybe if you don't have access to talking through some of those things with the therapist, that maybe you have a friend that you trust or someone that you can access to get more details about that. But speaking to the aspect of setting your space up the best you can, that I can speak to. Close your computer when you're done, right? When you're done, you're done. You are done. It's a hard stop, right? Setting things up, that things are pretty, whatever's pretty or whatever looks good to you, right? The greenery makes a lot of difference. All those little nuances will set you up in such a way that feels better. And if we feel better, right, just like crying, getting that out, if we feel better, we can respond better. Our health is better. All those things will kind of be a butterfly effect, but you have to start somewhere. And I would say start with what's small, what feels obtainable and that you could be efficacious about. And the likelihood that you'll be able to make larger changes will come much more quicker than just reading a book or just trying to figure it all out in one sitting. Start somewhere.
That's so good. And, one of the things that I do, Lashay, to your point, my office is now in my bedroom. And when I'm done, I leave out of here, right? Like there's a sense of like a distinct closure. And I think there might be a challenge that it's in her living room, so she may need to not only close it, but maybe put it away. But there has to be a sense of offness. And there also may be a reality to putting on different clothes, making, you know what I mean? Just the basic, like, okay, maybe I need to like put on some different clothes. I'm done, the finality that's there. But this is so good. Lashay, you even have like a therapist voice. You got the voice. I feel comforted. Okay, I want to do one last question. It's actually from my dad, which is crazy, right? But my dad, it's more of a statement, but I think it elicits a question.
Oh, that's great.
Which is that's my dad. You can see him there. That's Dr. J.T. Roberson. But he said everybody doesn't know what triggers them, and I thought that was actually a profound thought. What do you think about that? People not knowing.
Yeah, that's very good, and thank you so much, Dr. Roberson. You bring up a good point, and let me couple that a little bit better, actually. So thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. So while we might not put these classifiers on what triggers us, like I can clearly say I like chocolate cake. My grandparents owned a bakery. I'm from Oakland, California.
Man.
Bakery, like I know when I feel some degree of stress or some degree, even happiness, I'm like, where's the cake?
Where is the cake?
That has all these wonderful, sweet reminders of comfort and warmth for me. But I also have to tune in to say that when I'm not doing well, I'm also saying, where's the cake, right? So you're absolutely right in the sense that we might not be able to identify them in their categories like I just did. But I do think that we have insight to not what feels good. And maybe that's a better way to say it. We know when something doesn't feel good. We know that for the majority of us, or for those who are who have been through some experiences, to say, I don't like the way this feels. So that's the first step to identifying a trigger.
Yeah. Now
there's other ways to be able to classify and keep going. But that first step, when you're stressed, or when you don't feel good. Now, if you're operating on a more subconscious level and your body's responding, but maybe your mind is not, right? And something's off and you don't particularly know when you're not feeling good, but you are seeing signs of your own self of maybe what you're somaticizing. There's something off, or you wouldn't be asking this question of yourself, or you would carry on, right? It wouldn't exist. So let's say we're operating from a standpoint where you find something's existing. To continue to identify those triggers, sit down with yourself and ask friends and people that you trust, right? And to say, hey, I noticed this is what I'm feeling. Can you help me? Or to say, is there any pattern that you're seeing? Again, that has to be done in a very safe relationship. I would not say do that with someone that does not feel safe. You have to ask yourself what a safe relationship is like for you. And just because people tell you doesn't mean, that doesn't mean you have to take every aspect of it, but they might have some insight if you are having trouble identifying those. I think that you could sit with yourself, or take some time to identify those if you sit with yourself long enough, or if you're reflective. And of course, if any of that process is challenging for you from the beginning, try to find someone who is a licensed professional in the area of mental health.
Yeah.
Or someone that you trust. For a lot of people, actually, clergy, things like that, right? But of course, it doesn't matter whether it's a licensed professional, friend, clergy. It has to be someone that you trust, or at least you can build some level of trust with.
Yeah, I love that you talked about safety. And when you talked about how things can somaticize, like in the body, that's a new word for me, but I'm going to say it all the time now because I want to sound smart. So, but no, body, right? It's in the body. And I think what you're saying too is that friends can see your countenance in ways that you can't.
Oh, sure.
And so there does have to be a level of humility to be able to take on the reflective information that my friends are processing with me. So there's got to be my humility, but also the safety from them to be able to have that kind of, and then the other step is pastoral or seeing a therapist like you. Okay, I thought I was going to have one more question, but you're so good, Lashay, that I've got to, so let me, I think Haley has a question.
Can I add to that really quick, Pastor Robinson? Yes. Men somaticize stress the likelihood is that they'll somaticize in their body more than women, probably because women talk, right? Different. Okay. We're seeing that more. And so I really, really want to encourage the men on here, or anyone who will see this, is to tune into your body. Because the research and the data tells us that men will come in to see their primary care or whoever, and they'll say, I'm having my stomach, nerves in my stomach, or it might look like an ulcer or other things. So men, tune into your bodies. Tune into your bodies as well. Women as well, but I really want to speak to.
So how does it affect women?
I mean, you can see the same things, but you'll see the same things
more so in men.
Language, things like that, right? But generally, you're just not seeing as many men attend therapy, counseling, or have these conversations. And then, of course, when we talk about men of color, there's other nuances that we can add to that. So really tune into your bodies. So your back pain, things like that.
So men won't talk it out, but they'll feel it.
Oh, sure.
And that's an indication. That's so good. That's so good. Okay. This is from Haley. What are good questions to ask yourself to be able to identify where you're at mentally before starting the day?
Hmm. That's so wonderful. Thank you, Haley. Great question. Well, it depends on your personality, right? Because my personality, a great question for me, starts with where's my spirit? I love that biblically, God didn't say, Adam, how are you doing? He said, Adam, where are you? And
Mm,
so I like to kind of tune in to myself, and I can't escape this question the same way. When people say, how are you? I'm very quick to say, oh, I'm doing good, or whatever the case, right? Because it's kind of a customary way of greeting someone.
hmm.
But where are you is very, very different. And
Wow.
so I ask myself, where are you, Lashay? Where are you? You know, where are you today? And so I give myself that freedom to not feel good. I give myself that freedom to, and now, you know, I'm pregnant and little man can come, you know, and so it doesn't always feel good every day, right? And so I give myself that freedom and that space to say, where are you right now? And then you define, Haley, or whoever, you define what goes underneath where are you? Because for me, it's where am I spiritually, where am I emotionally, where am I physically, right? Sometimes I'm just dehydrated, you know, like where I could be that day is just dehydrated, whatever. It does,
Right,
we don't
right.
have, everything doesn't have to be extra or over spiritualized. But if you can check in, right, if you're not getting enough sleep or you're dehydrated, you're going to see other things somaticizing your health or your wellness. So sometimes it's asking yourself that simple question. But for each person, you'll need to define what that looks like for you. Are you more of a person who likes to tune in with your body first and then your emotions, or your emotions first and then your body? Because we know that some people are solution based and some people are emotional based, right? If you're
Mm,
emotional based, you need people and you need yourself to say, how are you, where are you in your emotions? But if you're solution based, you're like, okay, I know the first thing I need to do is get up, get some coffee, right? Drink my tea or get water, and then I'm a human being and I can tune in. So
right.
find out what it is for you. And if you don't know, ask a friend, right, or your partner or whoever, and they can help, maybe help give you insight as well.
So I want to, there are, so we have a bevy of questions coming right now. So this is what we're going to do. Let's do a speed round, Lashay. Okay. So we're just going to knock some questions out and I'm
Okay.
going to put them up on the screen.
Okay. And I'm
Um,
watching some too, so I'll blend in too if I can.
okay. As a this is S Media Trial. I don't know who that is.
Okay.
As a mental health professional, how frequent do you seek counseling for yourself?
That's a great question. And I'm never offended when people ask me a question like that. I think it's wonderful for a therapist to go to therapy. I personally consider it a professional responsibility. I think that if you're serving people on any level of serving people, especially the level of the emotions and things like that, it is important for you to make sure your emotions are being taken care of. I'm not above reproach. I have a therapist. I have spiritual parents that advise me and counsel me as well. I have mentors. And so all those things are things that I do on a regular basis. I think, so I'm saying on a regular basis, I think now how often I go may be more personal to me. And I think that
Mhm.
to anybody, but on a regular basis.
That's good. Actually, the question that I saw was somebody writing how they ask questions. I don't think we have any more right now. Oh, wait. John Lewis, Brandon Beach. Okay, yeah. Brandon, how do you guys work through that? Oh, I think that's a question that we were asking somebody, but I think that's all the questions. You might see some more. But Lashay, this has been dynamic. We'll have to do this again.
Sure.
Lashay, where can people, if they're looking, well, let me just announce for those that don't know, Bridge Church has a partnership with Lashay's therapeutic counseling, and so we actually do scholarships for people, those that need them, and but she is our therapist our go-to therapist. She has been incredibly effective for us. That's why we have her on here. And if you've been listening for the last 30 minutes, you know why she's so effective. But Lashay, how would somebody on their own just get in contact with you?
Sure. You can, I think probably the best thing right now is you can send me an email, quite frankly. You could also go to my website, Transformative Mental Wellness Solutions. I feel like that's long, so I would just post my email, Lashay S. Crayton @gmail.com. And I have time to do this and I will answer your emails. Don't feel like you're bothering me. Don't, if you need to check in, need some advice. I have factored things like that into my time as a work that I do. So you're not bothering me. Reach out if I can direct you, or send you something. So please feel free to do that. We have factored things like that into our practice to do on a regular basis. So you're not bothering us.
Yep. And so, if you lose track of that, if you email counseling@bridgechurchnyc.com and reference Lashay, we'll get you over there, and you can reach out to us and ask us about the financial side of it. Okay, we did get one last question. What is the best way to help your child through mental health needs while also working on your own as a parent?
That's great. Thank you. I'm assuming the name is pronounced Bria. Thank you, Bria. Great question. Children at this time are experiencing, I think every generation experiences something, whether it's depression, whether it's civil rights, every generation has their thing. So it's amazing to see now the thing for this generation on multiple levels. And so not ignoring that, making sure to continue to have these open, honest conversations with your children. Let them tell you that's enough, Mom. I don't want to hear anything else. Let them tell you that, because this new norm for children or young adults or adolescents is something very unseen. And so have those conversations, and you will find, right, that having those conversations actually feel good for you as well. Right. And asking for help when you need, when you can, for the resources that you have, not taking on more than what you can bear at this point. There's, children are out of school, and I'm not an educator. I don't have a background in education in the sense of academia. But I was homeschooled for a large period of my life, and my schooling and my education was not always reading, writing, and arithmetic in the formal sense. And so I had home economics, and that just meant I helped my mom cook that day, or my grandmother who was my homeschool educator. I just helped her cook that day. I learned math through going to buy tomatoes, So think of creative ways to be there to support your child that won't put too much pressure on you, because parents are not, some parents are not trained educationally to feel that they have the efficacy, or they feel efficacious about doing those things. So work within your means and your resources, and you'll find that this time in this relationship that you're building with your child in a time of grief and loss and a pandemic could be strengthened if you lean into it in a way that you can sustain in what feels good for both you and the child.
So good. We did get one last question. You have time?
Oh, I am good on time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And you were asked here, do you do video chat counseling?
That's all we're doing right now.
Yeah. So we have her email up here. I'm going to leave that email up, and then I'll just ask the question that John Lewis has. How do you, Lashay, integrate your faith and your practice together? And does that ever conflict with each other?
Sure. My faith and my practice, they don't conflict. I feel like it's a calling to be a therapist. I think it's a calling to be a teacher. A teacher has to be anointed to teach. A preacher has to be anointed to preach. The man who cleans the streets or the woman who cleans the streets have to be anointed to do that in order for it to operate to its fullest capacity. So my faith and my therapy practice is never at odds. I don't emphasize one over the other. They're all wisdom, all gifting, all calling comes from God. And so whether I'm heavily leaning on stats and science, it doesn't take away, it's not mutually exclusive from the goodness or the glory of God. So while there are plenty of times that I have sessions, because not all my clients are actually Christian, and I have not had any problems in any area like that. And so while at times I may heavily depend more on, in the sense of the science or the data, but the science comes from God. And so to me, there is no secular or spiritual, they can never be at odds if they're all given from God himself. So good.
Lashay, you have an anointing, and you have been a blessing to our body. Again, I think we'll have to do this again.
Oh my God, absolutely.
But Lashay, let's be praying for Lashay and this little guy coming.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let me pray real quick. Father, thank you for Lashay. Thank you for those who listened. I pray that this continue to bless people who are figuring out their lives and figuring out how to deal with this isolation. Lord, for those that are grieving, for those that have had job loss, Lord, we pray that your presence would be with them strong. Continue to bless Lashay and her counseling ministry, in her counseling service. and continue to use her beyond her imagination. In Christ's name we do pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank
we
you.
do encourage you guys to share this on your page. This can bless somebody. It truly can. So share this. We had about 30 people share last time. Please, let's get 40 people sharing it, because I really believe this information can be helpful. And there's a lot of people who may need a therapist that Lashay may be of service to. God bless you.
Even if I'm not a good fit for everyone, I accept that as well. We can direct you. We can help you. We have factored that in. That's a part of our ministry for our practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. You are a blessing. God bless everybody.
Thank you. God bless everyone.
Right,
bye-bye.